She is still inside you, even if she lives on the other side of the world, even if her body has returned to the earth, even if you haven't spoken for decades. Her presence stays, not only in memory, but in the invisible structure of your mind. Carl Jung warned about this force, feared and yet strangely formative, the maternal complex. We are not speaking here only about the woman herself, but about the inner image she left, an emotional trace, an invisible force that shapes your choices, your voice, your relationships, and the very story you tell about yourself. Jung called this the mother shadow. It is not the gentle face the world knew, it is the psychic residue of needs left unmet, of silent expectations, of ancestral pain no one wanted to see. Here is the most painful truth. You will not fully heal until you face that presence. Not the mother outside, but the mother who still lives inside you. For many, this path is not about blame. It is a call, a return to recover the parts of yourself that were never nourished, to recognize the mourning your inner child never got to feel, to drop weights that were never yours to carry. We don't point fingers here. We light candles in the dark corners of your psyche. True freedom does not come from resenting your mother. It comes when you find the courage to look at the mother within you.
In this text, we will dive into the forbidden zones of the soul. We will go past hurts, past ego, to the place where real healing begins, the symbolic death and the rebirth. You will see why your healing is stuck, how the mother wound shaped your identity, and how Jung's teachings. The truth is simple, but perception is complex. The mother as archetype. Jung called this the great mother. You can be controlled by it, or live in harmony with it. If you carry unresolved wounds with your personal mother, this archetype might be the key to the lost kingdom of your soul. When we of the mother idealize, we blind ourselves to our fragile humanity. We cast ourselves as enemies for being imperfect. Seeing your mother as a woman, not just your mother, is the hardest act of love. If those images are not brought into consciousness, in Jungian psychology, the mother is a psychic force that has an active life. In myths, she is the goddess who refuses to free her daughter. Dragons guarding treasures. Jung wrote that this fear is often the deepest and most personal shadow, the most powerful symbol of the constricting mother. It is the wound of control, and it weakens everything. But Jung also saw the devouring mother as the female face of consciousness. She teaches you to say no. Jung taught, visualize the devouring mother. Speak to her. Say your anger, your shame. Jung warned this transition often brings collapse. Let's be clear, the mother shadow is not your enemy. She is your threshold, your test, the final challenge before real freedom. In the vastness of the psyche, there is an invisible but powerful figure. She doesn't shout, she doesn't rule by force, but she orders, shapes, and controls quietly. Jung called her the inner image of the mother, the maternal imago, a psychic reflection of maternal presence deeply rooted in the unconscious. Even if your physical mother is gone, or you live far apart, or you cut contact, this inner mother remains, not as memory, but as a living, autonomous complex that influences how you think, feel, choose, and relate. She becomes the invisible queen of your personality. From the first moments of life, the mother's gaze, or its absence, was the mirror in which you first saw your value. How she touched you or rejected you, how she welcomed or ignored you. These did not stay only in memory. They were mythologized in the soul. Jung called this the maternal complex, a psychic field charged with emotion, symbols, and ancestral weight. The tragedy is that this inner image is not faithful to reality. It is the mother as you felt her, with a psyche still raw and trying to survive.
If the mother was consistent, sensitive, present, this inner image becomes a source of trust, fertile ground for self-esteem, security, and belonging. But if she was critical, absent, chaotic, or suffocating, the inner mother becomes a silent saboteur. She repeats phrases like, "You are exaggerating," "Be quiet," "Don't show who you are," "Be good," "Be invisible." You obey without knowing, not from weakness, but from deep conditioning. Jung warned, when we mistake that voice for our own truth, we become slaves to a ghost. From that ghost rises the inner saboteur, not a passing doubt, but the internalized criticism of a mother who used love as currency and withdrew affection when you didn't fit. This inner figure can become constant disappointment with yourself, an urge to silence, to hide, to stay small. She appears when something new tries to be born, whispering, "You can't, you will be rejected, it's dangerous." If we don't make that inner mother conscious, Jung said, she will be projected onto whoever is closest: lovers, bosses, therapists, mentors. You don't see them as they are. You see them through your mother's lens. You expect care they never promised. You react with fear, need, or rage, not because they caused it, but because the maternal wound still bleeds inside. What happens? You attract partners who repeat the childhood dynamic. Distant, controlling, critical. You keep trying to be chosen by someone in the unconscious hope of healing the old abandonment. The inner mother, unintegrated, becomes a distorted filter on reality. Confusion, disappointment, painful repetition. The inner mother can become a psychic vampire, not just metaphorically, but as energy. She drains your vitality, suffocates spontaneity, dims your creative light. You feel chronic tiredness, silent apathy, constant fear of choosing for yourself, fear of failure, fear of being free. Jung called this psychic possession, as if the soul were colonized, alive on the outside, but imprisoned inside. And paradoxically, you remain loyal to her, even if she hurt you. You believe, if I suffer enough, she may love me. If I obey enough, I may deserve what I never receive. Jung was clear. This mother does not evolve. She is a record frozen in time. The more you twist to please her, the further you move from yourself. Healing does not come from reconciling with the external mother. It comes from consciously separating from the inner image that keeps you captive. This requires courage to name the maternal complex, to face the inner figure no matter how frightening, to perform symbolic rituals, to let exiled feelings, anger, longing, betrayal, the wish to be seen, surface. It is time to unearth the voice you buried, to draw the boundaries you always feared setting, to reclaim the power you gave away to survive. This separation is not rebellion, it is individuation, the sacred right to exist as an I, not as a shadow of the mother. Jung also said, you must not only defeat the shadow, you must recover the light, the positive face of the maternal archetype that welcomes, protects, inspires, and creates. This does not come from fantasy, but from practice, forging a new inner bond through daily care, kind self-talk, feminine symbols, creativity, and presence. You begin to mother yourself. You treat your soul as you would treat a sacred child. Allow rest, allow feeling, allow mistakes, allow shining.
Jung wrote, "We do not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." That darkness in the field of the inner mother is the inherited voice, the ancestral fear, the wound of the soul. Until you face it with lucidity and not hate, you will remain chained. But when you look at it and say, "I see you, but now I choose," something changes. You stop asking permission and begin to permit yourself. You stop begging for love and start loving yourself. In that act, the spell of the inner mother begins to dissolve, and a new version of you starts to be born. Jung taught that one of the most sacred and painful crossings of the psyche is the symbolic separation from the maternal complex. It is not about rejecting the mother, it is about breaking the archetypal gravitational field that keeps pulling you back into fusion, dependence, and unconscious loyalty. Without this separation, there is no individuation, no true self, no waking life. This is not a public event, but a subtle, almost secret rite, a psychic death and rebirth hidden in adult struggles with boundaries, identity, and purpose. Many resist because separation hurts. The ego fears disappearance. The inner child fears death. Jung identified the forces that bind us: the fear of annihilation, the primal terror that to separate is to die, the guilt of betraying, the idea that growing up is ingratitude, the comfort of the known, where even suffering feels safer than freedom. Cultural values that praise obedience and bond at any cost also hold people captive. Jung said plainly, these are not ordinary neuroses. They are deep, ancient, universal archetypal forces. If we avoid the separation, the consequences are invisible but devastating. The child archetype takes the place of the adult. Beneath a seemingly functional life, an unhealed inner child still begs for permission to be real. Those people live in adult bodies but cannot claim inner authority. They fear acting, choosing, failing, not for what failure means, but for what it might trigger in the inner mother. Jung did not call this immaturity, he called it psychic captivity. True separation, he said, is the hero's journey. Descent into the unconscious forest, confrontation with the dragon, the mother shadow that turned jailer, and rebirth. The path is full of mourning, confusion, anger, and the deep silence of ancestral memory. Refusing the call is living a life of avoidance, repeating the mother's drama in every partner, every job, every frustrated desire. The ego must die for the self to be born.
Jung called that moment a psychic crucifixion, the death of the child who believed love is earned by self-annihilation, and the birth of an adult who no longer needs to earn existence. This birth is not neat. It is chaotic, demands mourning for what was never lived, tears down illusions, ends waits, and then after the death comes the void, a silence so vast it terrifies. But Jung said the void is sacred. It is the space that opens when the mother's voice no longer rules the psyche. The void is dangerous only if you do not claim it with your own values, desires, and choices. If you fail to occupy the new space, the mother shadow returns, subtler, stronger, more demanding. That is why separation is not an end, it is the beginning of creation. You must build a new inner structure, not inherited, but forged by self-awareness. When this happens, the sovereign ego awakens. Sovereign does not mean inflated ego or superiority. It means inner stability, an I that does not live to please, but to express. It acts not from guilt, but from alignment. It relates not to be saved, but to share. It does not demand certainties. It welcomes mystery. It does not beg for applause. It honors its own voice. Behind this process, there is a spiritual truth for Jung. The separation from the maternal complex is more than therapy. It is a sacred initiation. It is leaving the known world, where the mother is safety and rule, and entering the wild territory of the self. The self is not an ideal. It is a living presence, the center of the soul that carries purpose and dares you to fulfill it. Separating from the mother is not renouncing love, it is moving toward truth. When you do this, you stop being a puppet of old plots and become co-author of your destiny. Jung knew the psyche needs rights. We must mark this threshold with art, writing, symbols, gestures that declare the old is over. Write a letter to your inner mother. I honor you, but I no longer belong to you. I belong to myself. Create symbolic altars, not of stone, but of courage. Set limits. Tell the truth. Breathe without fear of punishment. Separation is not breaking love. It is devoting yourself to life. Become a vessel strong enough to hold both mourning and the beauty to come. Without this, we stay trapped in the same shadows. Jung wrote, "The task of man is to make conscious the content rising from the unconscious." In the maze of the maternal complex, the first door opens when you finally let go. Jung famously said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, It will direct your life, and you will call it fate. And nowhere does this show more powerfully than in the corrosive, silent effects of the unhealed mother wound. When the maternal complex is unexamined, it does not disappear. It seeps in, spreads, and becomes an invisible backdrop that tints everything: thoughts, feelings, choices, relationships. These are not personality flaws, but archetypal patterns, marks left by an old, still active pain.
Here are 9 deep signs that reveal unresolved maternal wound, an unrelenting inner critic that says you are never enough, fear of autonomy disguised as caution, a sacred guilt about prospering or being happy, patterns of self-abandonment to survive, repeating relationships that reenact the childhood wound, the central wound, I am not enough, as a silent mantra, suppression of creativity and fear of expressing yourself, psychosomatic symptoms where the body shouts what the mind represses, chronic fatigue, anxiety, eating disorders, unexplained pain, spiritual alienation, and an existential void. These symptoms are not weaknesses. They are messages from the soul, signals that something essential was lost, ignored, or buried. Jung did not teach us to blame our mothers. He taught us to retrieve our projections, face what was exiled, and reclaim who we really are. Healing is not erasing the past. It is learning to hold it firmly without letting it imprison you. When the maternal wound unconsciously tells your story, you can change course by seeing it clearly and courageously. Then the child who was never seen can become the adult who chooses to see themselves. That is where healing begins and where true freedom is born. If something in this text touched you, if a word named what you felt but could not name, write in the comments, I free myself. Your voice can be a lighthouse for someone else, a map in the dark, a reminder that real connection begins within. If someone close to you still believes love must hurt or that you must shrink to belong, share this message. Real love does not ask you to disappear. The most important home you will ever inhabit is yourself. Thank you for being here, not only in this reading, but on the sacred path of remembering who you are. Until the next journey.